The three biggest mistakes that new real estate investors make. That's today's show. Let's dive into it. Here we are at our very first rental property. Hey everyone, I'm Clayton Morris, longtime real estate investor. Back in 2017, quit my day job in order to focus on helping others create financial freedom and financial intelligence, and that's what this whole channel is devoted to. So if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for subscribing and hanging out and checking out our whole back catalog of content to help you create financial freedom. So on today's show, we are going to deep dive some early mistakes that new investors make. And our guest today is Ryan Wright. He is the host and creator of the DoHardMoney.com. At 21 years old, he was a broke kid with no clue on how to actually build wealth, and now he's a multi-millionaire thanks to real estate investing. And there's certain things that make his blood boil, like they make my blood boil in the real estate world, which is easy mistakes. Mistakes that are so easy to avoid if you just pay attention. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's a thrill to have you here. And so before we dive into some of the big mistakes that I think you and I are on the same wavelength about this stuff, very easy to avoid, but it's so common pitfalls. We'll dive into those in a moment, but set the stage for our audience. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in real estate investing and where that sort of light bulb moment was for you that this is a great way to build wealth.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't know if I really had a choice. I kind of grew up in the business a little bit. My grandpa was flipping homes before it was even popular, 50, 60, 70 years ago in Southern California. He was a HVAC guy and had some extra time. And so he'd buy a house and slowly fix it up and then sell it. Sometimes he'd move into it. My dad got into, so he was doing a little bit of fix and flip, right? And then my dad got into rental properties. So he would buy a duplex or a threeplex or a fourplex. And he had a day job. He was a chiropractor. And then he would work to pay that property off and then, buy another one and work to pay it off. So I grew up doing rehab and painting and fixing up rental properties. So I kind of had a little bit of the flip background, a little bit of the rental management background. And so when I graduated from high school, I just knew real estate was a great vehicle. Now, I didn't know I was going to be doing it full time, but I just knew real estate was a vehicle to create wealth and passive income and those types of things. And so I started out by getting my real estate license and just being a traditional agent, starting to buy my own rental properties and slowly acquiring them like my dad did. And, the story just goes on from there.
That's great. And you and I were talking before the show about shaving. So this is kind of funny because you and I we can live this sort of lifestyle. I mean, I used to work in the corporate world. I was a television news anchor, and they made me shave every day. I had to have a clean shave, and I would never be able to wear a hat on the air. You said I only shave on Sundays, and so living that freedom life, right? I mean, it's you have the power to do whatever you want, and I think that real estate for a lot of people can create that freedom, right?
Oh, it's the most powerful vehicle you can ever think of. It can appreciate, it can give passive income, you can flip it for fast cash. There's so many options with it. I'm with you. When I was a traditional real estate agent, I had to wear a tie every single day. I had to make myself look older than I really was and some of that type of stuff. And yeah, I wear what I want and do what I want. And it's exciting. It's exciting that it's exciting to have a vehicle that can provide those things that's really accessible to anyone that's willing to put in the effort to get it. It's not like you got to have, a doctorate's degree or you've got to be a heart surgeon or something like that to amass a small fortune. It's anybody that's willing to spend a little time, get some knowledge and then go out there and apply it and be tenacious about it.
Yeah, that's right. And, that I get to wear like my company hat, instead of having to comb my hair to do my own show. That's freedom. That's freedom. It's like Costanza on Seinfeld. He can, like the summer of George, he can live that life. So let's dive into it. I want to go back, before we dive into some of the big mistakes that new real estate investors make, I want to go back to something you said about watching your grandfather flipping homes in California. My wife, was from California, and it's, back then it might have been easier. Now it's ridiculously overpriced and kind of crazy out there. But take me back to watching your grandfather do this. What things did you take away and watching grow up in the family business, so to speak, that you took away from that?
Well, I learned I don't want to do electrical work. I remember getting shocked more times than once.
And that was like
Pulling
what,
some
knob
wires.
and tube wiring back then?
Yeah, exactly. And I've ran into a few houses with knob and tube.
Oh,
I think
sure.
the best thing that I learned from my grandpa, and also kind of from my grandpa and from my dad, number one was um, they loved to see the transformation. So they were really passionate about seeing this like before and after. They looked at it as like raw materials and taking like a lump of clay and turning it into a statue. And they knew how to do that without spending too much money and overpricing it and those types of things. I think that was a big thing. But the second thing, and probably the more important thing, was understanding the repair process, what has to happen. So later, as I did work myself when I first got started, and then as I hired people, I didn't get taken. I knew what it was going to cost to lay the tile. I knew what it was going to take to do the work. I could speak intelligently about it. Even if I didn't want to do the electrical, I knew that there was, which cables and I knew how it was all going to put together. And so I couldn't get overtaken by a contractor that was just trying to take somebody for a ride, which happens way too often.
Oh, way too often, way too often. And it happens too, it's going to happen right now in California, sadly, after all the fires. People are going to be paying way too much for work because they can. Right after Hurricane Sandy blew through the Northeast, people are paying $7,000 to have a tree removed in
Yeah.
because you can, and price gouging comes in, attorneys general get involved and try to stop it, but it happens. So let's dive into the three biggest mistakes that new real estate investors make. And I think maybe first on the list, we can talk about something that really we've talked about endlessly here on this show, which is to make sure that people aren't overpaying for properties, that you're not just calling up the realtor on the weekend, being a weekend warrior, and listening to a retail realtor who doesn't know investors, and you're overpaying for property. Take that one, Ryan, and run with it.
I mean, the reality is too many people just think, all I've got to do to find a property is call an agent and they'll do it all for me. Mm-hmm. And the reality is you make your money in finding a good deal. You're going to realize that profit when you sell the property, but the money's made in finding a good deal, whoever can find the properties. And I think a lot of real estate investors forget that their number one job is marketing. Like, they've got to get a way to get leads coming in that have value, that they know have equity. And just going off the MLS. Now, there are some areas in the country where you can find a property on the MLS and negotiate and try and make a deal happen. And occasionally a great deal comes across the MLS. But when it does, it's a supply and demand issue. There's thousands of agents that are jumping all over it to invest themselves or give to a customer. That drives the prices up. And I'm just a really big fan about going after off-market properties. So properties that aren't for sale or aren't on the MLS. And you can do this now with technology. You can find out how much somebody owes on their property. You can get a rough idea what that property's worth, and you can also look for things like divorce or bankruptcy or a lien if they have an involuntary lien. And you can target those people specifically by postcards or slide broadcasts or knocking on their doors, and actually go to them and go after these off-market properties that have motivation and have equity. So you're not competing with the numbers and the masses. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people is going after these properties that are listed on the MLS, or delegating their success to a real estate agent and saying, hey, they're going to make the money for me because they're going to find that property. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see time and time again.
Yeah, and we've done a whole show on wholesaling, so you've got to check that episode out where we deep dive. I've done, hundreds of wholesale deals here in the state of New Jersey over the years. Now, I wasn't hanging on to the property myself, of course, because I had flippers that I worked with that wanted to spend the year, 9 months to rehab that house and then sell it for $800,000. That wasn't my bag. But you're absolutely right. I never got leads from realtors. I had to find them myself. I had to go out and seek them. I would send thousands of dollars in postcards, to find leads. Going to a website like ListSource and buying names of people that had equity in their properties, and then sending out thousands of mailers, setting up a phone system so that people would call in and we would be able to answer them and see if they were actually interested in selling their house for a discount. How much does that property need in rehab? Are there asbestos pipes in the basement? All of these things that you can then negotiate and find out if that person has an overinflated sense of how much that property is worth. And you have to say, look, you got asbestos pipes in the basement. We have asbestos tiles here. We're going to have to replace the entire kitchen that needs a brand new roof. Then you can start to negotiate a little bit, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to have a profitable property, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that approach. Though, what you're saying here, Clayton, is basically tell the seller, hey, a good transaction is a win-win. I'm not
Hmm.
taking advantage of someone. They know what they're getting themselves into. They know they can't sell the property. I think especially new investors don't understand this idea. If a property can't qualify for a loan, and there is certain criteria that are required to get an FHA loan. You can't have sloping towards the property. You can't have wood to earth contact. You can't have the HVAC needs to be working. Like all these things, there's a checklist you can download it. That the FHA appraiser goes through to make sure a property's in that condition. If a property doesn't meet that condition, then a seller can't sell their home to a home buyer that's going to go to the bank to get a loan. It's impossible. So they have two choices. They can either fix it up, or they can sell it to someone that's going to pay cash or get a hard money loan or a private finance loan. Those are the only two options they have. And most people don't want to spend the money to fix it up. So they really need to sell the property to somebody that can bring the cash through a private investor or through a hard money lender. That's really the only option. So we're offering a huge service to these people.
Yeah, and sidebar, I'm sure you probably have the same approach to this. My wife's a realtor, but let's be honest, realtors don't want to deal with these types of properties. So if that seller calls up a realtor and says, look, I've got a piece of junk property. I inherited this thing from my mom who passed away. It needs a ton of work. The HVAC is not working. It's got leaks in the roof. It's got all of these issues. A realtor is probably going to say, I can't do anything with this, and therefore, working with a realtor, they're probably not going to be able to bring you deals like this. It's rare to find realtors who get investors and who understand it. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. And in full disclosure, I'm an agent. My wife's a real estate broker, and so we did that. We weren't sure where to start to get into the real estate investing game. So we thought, well, let's become an agent. So I've kept that license and, those types of things. We'll occasionally do a deal here or there or do our own properties, that type of stuff. But yeah, the reality is that there, agents don't understand the investing world, and they don't understand the rehab world, and they don't understand how to help somebody that's got a property unless it meets FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines for the condition of the property. If it fits that, in most cases, it's best to list with an agent and go do it if you've got the time to do it. Lots of times you need cash faster than that, and so there's an advantage to working with an investor like ourselves.
Great point. Okay, so we got through number one here, which is, finding off-market properties and not overpaying for them, because you're still going to have to rehab the property. So why would you pay retail price for a property if you still have to put $20,000, $30,000 worth of work into it? It doesn't make sense. So then you're upside down. Okay, what's number two on your list here, Ryan?
Well, I think the other one is overvaluing properties. And so I see this happen all the time where somebody finds a deal and they try and turn it into a deal. So they find a property and try and make it a deal when it shouldn't be. This happens a lot either through one of two ways. I see it happening two different ways. One is falling in love with a comp, meaning they find one comparable, they find the highest comparable, and they say, my house is going to sell for this, and there's only one. The other way that I find them doing that is being in what I call fringe marketplaces. So they're on the busy street and all the comps are not on the busy street. They're closer in, they're more part of the neighborhood, and they're saying, oh, my house on a busy street will sell the same as this one that's in this nice neighborhood that's a few blocks away. And so there's these natural barriers. So it's one of those two things. It's either falling in love with a comp or overlooking these natural barriers or these fringe areas and using comps that really aren't comps. If you're going to be on a busy street, you've got to use a comp on a busy street. If you're going to cross a major barrier, you've got to realize on the west side, it's less money than the east side or whatever it is in your area. But you've got to be cognizant of that because you don't want to get yourself in a bad deal. And we see people all the time overpricing properties because of one of these two major mistakes.
Right. Know your market, understand your streets, understand and know your rental market too, and what the rent value is going to be from this street to that. That's really powerful information to deep dive. You bring up another great point, because my mentor in this business years ago said a lot of times people try to force a deal, right? Buyers will come to you when there's a deal, because a deal is a deal. But if you try to force it, massage it, fake it, try to chase after it, it's never going to work out, right? I mean, it doesn't fit. You're trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah. And I see it happen all the time. It's kind of this like fall in love, fall in love with the first girl you kiss type idea where it's like, yeah, that might not be the one to go for. And so, you spend a lot of effort trying to find a good deal. And then you've got to spend a lot of effort vetting that deal to ensure it is a good deal. And then you take the risk to go and move forward on it. But just any phone call is not going to turn into a great deal. You're going to have to go through a lot of those to find the right one, but it is worth it. I can tell you the pain of bringing a bad deal or getting in with a lender that will fund a bad deal, and then you owe them money or you got to go bankrupt or something like that is a horrible situation. So you don't want to just hope and wish that you're going to end up better than what it was supposed to be. You want to really listen and get some good advice and make sure that you're getting into a deal that's going to make money. And I see this a lot even with real estate agents where they find a property that really isn't a great deal, but then they try and find that one comp and say, oh, you're going to make all this money. And it's the hope and dream strategy just doesn't make a lot of sense. We tell people choose the 3 lowest comps in the area. Don't start with the highest, start with the lowest, work your way up. Once you've found 3 lowest properties that are going to be in similar condition to what you're going to have, those are your 3 comps. But don't start with the highest, start with the lowest, work your way up, use those as your comps. You might get more for it, but you might not. At least you're conservative saying, I'm really comfortable. I'm going to at least get this price. I might get this price, but I'm definitely going to get this price. And if you get somewhere in the middle, you're coming out good, but you're not going to get in a situation where you're going to lose your hat on a deal, which is what you want to avoid.
One of the things you kind of touched on earlier in the show was about contractors. So I really imagine that's probably number 3 on your list here is how not to overpay or get taken by contractors. And if you are in the real estate business, unfortunately, it's probably going to happen to you at some point. But listening to Ryan and I discuss this right now, hopefully will mitigate your chances of this happening. So how do we protect ourselves against runaway contractors?
Yeah, and I really think there's 2 issues on this. There's the overpriced contractors, and then there's the underpriced contractors. So both ends of this spectrum is so big because if a contractor underbids it, if they, it's a $40,000 job and they bid it for 30 and you go with them because they're the lowest contractor, and then it turns out you need more money because they find problems, that's just as bad as, getting overpriced. So I think one of the big things is there's software out there that can tell you in real time what materials and labor are costing for different items. How much does it cost to put an HVAC? How much does it cost to redo a kitchen, depending upon the size of kitchen? There's some really good softwares out there that can help with that. And so you can plug those numbers in, you can know what they are, and you can use that as a judge. The other thing is getting some referrals or finding contractors that work a lot with real estate agents. I also, when I was early on, I used to go to the apartment associations, and I would call the apartment associations because typically apartments don't have big budgets. And so they try and get handyman and guys that do that stuff. So I would get people that sponsored the apartment associations because they're typically at lower prices. And I would call them and say, hey, can you come help us? One of the guys I still use to this day, I found him that way 15 years ago. His name's Pat. And he does great work for us, and we get a really good bargain. The guy that's driving around in a $100,000 pickup truck is not the guy you want to have come change, do your HVAC system. We see it all the time. People spend $15,000 on an HVAC system that they should spend $4,000 on. If you're going with, I call it the yellow page, that maybe that ages me a little bit, but if you go after the yellow page guys, then you're going to get taken.
No, that's a great point. It's kind of like the Sears approach. I mean, we've certainly bought, investment properties where we do our deals, and we've found where, the homeowner had like a furnace installed by Sears, and that they spent like a couple thousand more than you would normally spend to put in a furnace in there. So there's no way we're ripping that furnace out because they just spent way too much, and, there's no reason to do it. But people will spend that because they go with that brand name sometimes. It's like, it's like when you go to the drugstore and you have the choice of buying the Tylenol or the Walgreens version of Tylenol, which is, by the way, the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got your generic versus your name brand issue, but then you also just have simply the cost of marketing. Mm-hmm. If the guy's marketing on advertising on the television, that guy has to spend 20, 30, 40% more to get you as a customer than the guy around the corner that's never ran an ad in his life. So finding good contractors that you can say, hey, I'll keep you busy. They'll say, great, I'm 30, 40% less than somebody else because I don't have all this advertising overhead. And so you can find good guys, and you can even put in the same materials. It could be a train, for an HVAC system that they're putting in, the difference being, or you could use, like you're saying, Clayton, you could also use a generic approach and say, hey, this is a train and this is brand XYZ. They're really the same thing. They're made in the same factory. Go ahead and put this one in. So, I mean, there's so many options there when it comes to contractors.
Right. No, great tips there. So, You also have a book. We're going to link it up in our show notes that you love to give away for free. What's the name of the book? And we'll make sure we have a link in our show notes in the description for people to grab it, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. It's How to Get More Money Than You Can Ever Handle, a real estate investor's guide to funding deals. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those different places. But if you can get a physical copy there. If you want a digital copy, you can have one for free. Just go to dohardmoney.com/podcast-gift, and we'll put that in the show notes.
Perfect. So what's next for you, Ryan? You've done almost, over like 400 real estate transactions. You've quit your day job, so to speak. What's next for you?
What I'm really getting geeked out about right now is software. So we've gotten into some software plays for real estate investors. We've talked a little bit about, some of these different ways to find properties and everything else. And so we're really getting knee deep into software for valuing properties, for understanding where opportunities are, slide broadcast, marketing, postcards, as well as contractor estimates and that type of stuff, linking up. So we've got some cool stuff there, and that's really exciting to me. I think this is like giving a leg up for people. So software and getting access to those things is kind of the next coolest thing. I just think of how much is faster and more success I would have had with some of these tools that are now available versus going to the county recorders and that stuff. And so I'm getting really excited about it.
We've all done that. I mean, I like that you and I are in the same wavelength. We've been at the county recorder's office, going through books, trying to find leads. I mean, that's how we did it back in the day. And you're right, man. The disruption right now in the software space, especially in the commercial side and moving hopefully more into the residential side, really, really exciting stuff. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. It's been a real pleasure having you here on the show.
Loved it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. My guest, Ryan Wright. Check out everything we talked about, dohardmoney.com. We'll have links in the show notes to check out the free book as well. Ryan, thanks so much. Good luck to you and all of your endeavors, and we'll have you back on soon.
Sounds great.
All right, great. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks to all of you for downloading and subscribing. And thanks to Inc. Magazine for naming this one of the best business shows out there. We really appreciate it. So please share this with someone that you think could use financial intelligence in their life. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a sister. Just gently forward an email and say, hey, honey, check this out. I think it could change your life. We hope it would. Thanks so much for subscribing. We'll see you next time. Now go out there, take action, become a real estate investor, because I believe it's the #1 way to build wealth. We'll see you next time.